What's up, YouTube? We're gonna have a little discussion today. Today, I wanted to talk about copying in the yo-yo community. So, I don't actually want to come to a conclusion with this discussion. I really just kind of want to talk about it, I think. And it comes up pretty often, whether it's copying a yo-yo design, whether it's, you know, copying of colorways or certain types of colorways, or just design elements in a yo-yo, or what have you. Personally, I guess my opinion on it doesn't really matter. It's not something that I would go out of my way to ever copy something else, be it on, you know, on a yo-yo or of a colorway or something like that. I feel like everything is sort of built upon inspiration within yo-yo. So, whereas something might be copying one way and something actually just might be an evolution of what has already come before it. So I think that's an important distinction to make sure you look at. First, let's talk about yo-yo tricks. I think this is really where the evolution thing comes from. People often say, oh, everybody's just basically copying Yuki Spencer and Takeshi. I don't know if they're copying, but I think that's really sort of, and Jensen as well, but I think that's really sort of, those guys, and I'm sure there's others that I'm missing, are sort of, you know, the sort of baseline for what modern yo-yoing has become, and particularly what modern 1A yo-yo tricks have become. So the fact that you see a ton of elements that were sort of come up with or heavily used by those guys in particular, you know, I would say is not that surprising. It really at all. You know, those guys are, you know, all world champs, fantastic players, and truly, you know, pioneers of the game. And you know, to take them as sort of a building block, as a base point, and build upon their greatness, I think really is cool, and really has sort of launched, you know, yo-yo into what it has become now. I mean, you can go watch these guys, watch routines now. Watch routines now compared to routines like 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody's just gotten so much better, and everybody's just so good. And you know, there were guys who were that good a few years ago, mostly the guys I just mentioned, but you know, there are so many more people who, you know, using elements and things like you know, Yuki and whomever else were using, really like stepped up the game even more, and now the competition's even closer and even more fierce, and I think that's really kind of like, that's cool. So, you know, sometimes you see or hear that that's copying of another person's trick or something. I don't necessarily feel that way about yo-yo tricks. They really are just sort of a building block of the evolution of where tricks, particularly competition tricks, go. Now, I don't compete, and I will steal everybody's yo-yo tricks who's willing to show me a yo-yo trick, and I will do any yo-yo trick that I can actually do, whether it's something I came up with, something somebody else came up with, or whatever else. So, to me, you know, I don't think that copying yo-yo tricks are necessarily a bad thing ever. I really think it's more flattery than anything else. Now, if you're going to copy somebody's routine, you know, trick for trick, that's not that cool, but I don't know that I've ever seen anybody sort of copy a routine exactly. It's probably happened, but I don't know that I've ever seen it happen, or if it does happen, if it happens all that often. Another thing that kind of gets copied and has come up recently, you know, is anodization and ano techniques particularly. So what am I talking about? Ano technique, you'll notice that there have been a few companies lately, besides G Squared Yo-Yos, that have done swirls. Now, this is something I'm not going to really take a stance on. Jake is my friend. If I was to create a yo-yo, I would not put a swirl colorway on a yo-yo. However, I'm also not a yo-yo company trying to sell a bazillion yo-yos. For those of you that don't know, I'm working with Jeremy McKay to do basically a yo-yo for me. It's really for me, and we're not putting swirls on any of these yo-yos. We've not discussed it. It's not a colorway. It's just not a thing I'm interested in having on my yo-yo. Not that I don't think swirls are cool, but to me they're a G squared thing, and I'm clearly not G squared. I'm not Jake. I like Jake. I know Jake. Met him personally several times, and you know, great dude. Just not something I would do personally, on a personal level. Now, you know, am I necessarily, you know, whether or not you are necessarily opposed to other yo-yo companies besides G squared yo-yos doing swirls, it's really up to you. I understand it. If you're like super upset that like somebody else is doing a swirl, or maybe even has copied a swirl that's a very similar colorway, I don't know that I've seen any that have been that close particularly, but again, I don't have all of the G squared colorway swirls memorized, so, you know, I don't think I've seen the Rainicorn swirl or anything like that, but, you know, that's, I guess, you know, signature super colorways maybe. I think that would be a little bit more of a faux pas, but just to kind of copy the swirl anodization process, especially because, you know, none of us are particularly, like, when we make yo-yos, like, I'm not, like, when I release a yo-yo or make a yo-yo, I didn't make the yo-yo, like, I didn't turn the yo-yo on a lathe and then anodize it myself and stuff. Like, there are guys that do stuff like that, like Monkey Finger Ray anodized, like, he actually is the guy that anodizes the yo-yo, the Monkey Finger yo-yos that you buy. I know he doesn't, like, machine them, but he's the guy that anodizes them. And actually the one that they did with One Drop machined them, and then he anodized them, which I think is super cool, by the way. That's the kind of thing that to me is just like, that to me is sort of the grail of things. Could it be wrong in some sense to copy like certain anodization things that are maybe signatures for other companies? Yeah, but when it's done on sort of a more either mass-produced, or if it's done, you know, by the same guy who generally does the anodization anyway, just on a different company's yo-yo, you know, that's, I think, up for you to decide. I don't know, like, I'm not gonna, I probably wouldn't purchase any of them, just based off of pictures that I've seen, and a lot of times, too, that just costs a lot more, and quite frankly, I don't buy that many yo-yos anymore, to review, particularly. Just because there's so many coming in that it's often hard to like justify spending my money on stuff when I could spend my money on like going to a contest or something like that, or helping support a contest or something to that effect. So I would rather do that than spend my money on yo-yo. Although I do buy yo-yos sometimes, usually like maybe one every other month or so, maybe two, maybe one a month, something like that. But I don't buy, you know, you see me review probably 2-3 a week. I don't buy that many. They just show up. Anyway, moving on. So that's anodization. You know, you can't really copyright a colorway, but I get it. And it's sort of going to kind of be up to the buyer, I think, really, to decide whether or not that's a thing that, you know, they're okay with or not. You know, like I said, I'm not necessarily the market guy for that. I don't collect based on colorway, but I understand those that do. Shapes, I think yo-yo shapes, that's a totally different thing as well. You know, I think everything still to this day particularly is kind of more or less a play off of a butterfly, off of a Duncan butterfly. So, you know, organic shapes and V shapes and what have you, they're all sort of the play off of that. Now, I know they're all different, what have you, and occasionally things come up where one yo-yo looks almost exactly like, or really darn close to another. And I probably have cut that down a little bit. I've had a lot of yo-yos that have sort of looked very, very, very similar and played very, very similarly to each other. Sort of kind of decided which one I thought was the best, or, you know, which one I thought had the best color, best other stuff, finish, and what have you, and kind of got rid of the ones that were basically played the same, but maybe I didn't like the finish as well, or whatever. But, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of controversy in the community when somebody puts something out that looks kind of like something else that already came out. There's often a lot of controversy in the community to say, hey, this looks just like this, and that looks just like that. In fact, I think there was a whole, I guess it was a spoof Instagram page. I'm not sure if it even still exists. There was a whole Instagram page that was like, hey, this looks like this. This looks like this. And I know some people thought it was funny. Some people were mad about it. And, you know, I don't necessarily think that there are that many unique yo-yo shapes that actually would work. I think we kind of already know what works in the yo-yo community, and it sort of ends up being either your traditional, you know, V shape, an organic shape, a wing sort of W shape, or an H shape, or some iteration in between. Usually you kind of get a rounded over H shape. I'd say that's probably the most common, like, sort of betweener shape, is like an H shape or like a bell shape that sort of rounds over and kind of isn't so much hard H, but kind of is more rounded over. And there's a lot of variation you can put into that, and there's a lot of variation you can put between the three, but with so many yo-yos coming out all the time, you know, eventually, and more often than not, you know, a good bit of the time, people are going to sort of come up with similar elements of yo-yos that are going to kind of make yo-yos look the same, sometimes even play really, really similarly. I'll give you an example. The Top Yo Silenus and the Orca are very similar yo-yos in shape and weight and size. They don't really play that close to each other, but they look pretty similar. I wouldn't say that the Top Yo Silenus is a better Orca. I still think the Orca is better, but it's cheaper and it's definitely cool. It's a good yo-yo. It's sort of just like the budget version, I would say, of the Orca. I would look at the Orca as like, you know, the Les Paul Standard, the Gibson Les Paul Standard version of a yo-yo. And the Silenus, I would say, is sort of the Epiphone Les Paul Standard version of a yo-yo. Nothing wrong with an Epiphone. Still plays real good, still sounds really good, but it's not a Gibson. And if you threw them back to back, you'd be able to tell, like, oh yeah, I like the Orca a little bit better, at least for me. I like the Orca better. And to me, you know, especially some of the colorways I have, I feel like that the difference in price sort of warrants, you know, what it is. So, are they similar? Yeah, they're similar. Are they exact? No. And is, you know, one of them a little more premium than the other? Yeah, it definitely, absolutely. So, as far as shapes are concerned, I don't think anybody out there really can copy anything else, per se, unless it's just a direct knockoff that's like $5 like has been done before, and that's even sort of an old school thing. Now there's been so many yo-yos that have come out, it's almost impossible to do. But unless it's a direct knockoff, like, you know, you've got the Shutter and something comes out that's almost, you know, exactly the same, and they call it like the Butter or something like that, it's almost, you know, unless it's a direct knockoff and it's just looking to be, or like the fake Nears and things like that, you know, trying to just sort of play off of the already successful version of something. I don't necessarily think it's problematic to create yo-yos that are similar to other yo-yos that have been out for a while, particularly yo-yos that maybe have been discontinued, or use design elements in yo-yos in different ways, even though they're the similar design elements. Like, think of bimetals. You know, for the longest time, I think there was a patent on clamping the ring to the end of the bimetal yo-yo, and that's why, you know, nobody really did those for a while. And then all of a sudden that patent ran out, and all of a sudden all these bimetals came out that had the rings clamped to the end of them. You know, that was the only way in like 2015, 2016. That was really the only way you ever saw a bimetal. Was it was a yo-yo, but it had like the metal rings clamped to each other, clamped to the ends of the rims. Now we've seen some variations of that lately, but for the longest time that was all you saw, and I think that was patented. I'm not 100% certain on that. I had heard that. If I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. And then all of a sudden, everybody else started doing it because that sort of design patent had gone away. So, you know, you've seen kind of things like that happen, and oftentimes, you know, people get upset when certain design elements that a certain company feels that they have pioneered, and this is, you know, rightly so, has, you know, sort of been usurped by maybe another company, either through, you know, maybe not even necessarily through a collaboration, just it maybe usually it's these sort of like Chinese brands that end up kind of like taking that element and sticking it in, you know, one of their yo-yos. That's usually either what causes the uproar or kind of what, I guess, breaks down the barrier of, oh, well, this company did it, now I can do it, type of a thing. So there's that element as well, and I know it creates a lot of drama and it can create some problems sometimes. I feel like a lot of things fly under the radar, but sometimes it just happens and somebody gets mad about it. I don't exactly know how to feel, because I feel like that's sort of how you evolve yo-yo design as well. I feel like yo-yo design, kind of like yo-yo tricks, needs to evolve, and if somebody comes up with something good, then somebody else should be able to take that good thing and maybe do something to it, tweak it a little bit, and make it better. Again, like I said, if it's a direct copy, just meant to play off of the already success of the predecessor, that's a little different. If it's sort of taking it to the next level, I feel like that can kind of be a warranted thing. But, you know, let me know what you guys think. Tell me down in the comments. Does that make sense to you? I don't know the answer to the question. I feel like it's probably a little bit of both, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers to you, and I'll see you next time.